Chapter 2, Pot 101, Understanding Marijuana. For more than 3 decades, Democratic Congressman Tom Harkin has served as a reasoned voice for the health and welfare of America's rural communities. While in Washington, he has spearheaded federal efforts to expand funding for medical research and alternative energy programs. Among his peers and his constituents, Harkin is well known for his commitment to civil liberties, having successfully championed the Americans with Disabilities Act, which prohibits discrimination against those with mental and physical disabilities. By almost all appearances, Senator Harkin is a compassionate, well-educated, rational human being, just the sort of person that most Americans want representing them in Congress. However, bring up the topic of marijuana, and a seldom-seen side of Harkin's personality rises to the surface, one that shares more in common with the reefer madness era of the 1930s than reflects the situation today. In 2008, an Iowa NORML member wrote to Harkin and asked him to explain why he supports the criminal prohibition of marijuana. The lawmaker's reply: marijuana is not the recreational drug that many people believe it to be. Marijuana use often has fatal consequences. Within days, the senator's over-the-top response was eliciting tongue-in-cheek snippets nationwide. On the internet, tens of thousands of Americans logged onto the website of Washington, D.C. gossip columnist Wonkette Anna Marie Cox, who mockingly posted the headlines, "Senator Tom Harkin, marijuana makes people sell their children." In the eyes of many, particularly those tens of millions of adults who use or had ever used marijuana, the remarks turned the one-time U.S. presidential candidate into an immediate laughingstock, the poster child for what some Americans don't know about pot. Unfortunately, such marijuana ignorance is hardly limited to one lone senator from Iowa. Although marijuana is the most widely used illicit intoxicant in the United States and the world, much of the public and apparently some prominent politicians still remain woefully ignorant about the plant's multiple uses and its psychoactive effects. There are several reasons for this confusion. For starters, independent public opinion polls indicate that only about 1/2 of the American population admits to having had first-hand experience with cannabis. Further, among those who have tried pot, some only experimented with the drug on a handful of occasions. Many others ceased their use altogether decades ago. Additionally, society is bombarded with varying and often contradictory messages about pot. The White House Office of National Drug Control Policy, more commonly known as the Drug Czar's office, has spent tens of millions of taxpayers' dollars per year to produce print and television advertisements stigmatizing marijuana, blaming its use for a host of societal ills. Conversely, national advocacy groups like NORML, SAFER, and the Marijuana Policy Project engage in national outreach and media campaigns rebutting many of the U.S. government's widespread and oft-repeated claims, most of which are based on rhetoric and stereotypes rather than scientific facts. Law enforcement organizations also muddy the waters, often distorting the facts about marijuana to the mainstream media and to young people via so-called drug education programs like Drug Abuse Resistance Education, or DARE, which is taught in some 3 out of 4 U.S. public schools. Indeed, these days it's hardly hyperbole for young people to say, "Everything I ever learned about marijuana I learned in junior high, and all of it was wrong." We're here to inform you and to set the record straight. To be clear, the information that follows is not just for people who have never been exposed to marijuana. Even most occasional users of cannabis have only a surface knowledge of the drug and are in need of a crash course in Marijuana 101. To give you a sense of what we mean, think for a moment about your knowledge of alcohol. Although you may assume that you don't know much about booze, and that moreover there isn't much to know, people drink, they get drunk, and that's that. It's quite likely that you know far more than you think you do. You certainly know that there are many kinds of alcohol legally available for consumption, such as beer, wine, schnapps, vodka, rum, whiskey, and even pure grain alcohol. You are aware that these beverages vary greatly in terms of their intoxicating effects. For example, there is a huge difference between 12 ounces of beer and 12 ounces of vodka. You probably even know a thing or two about the alcohol content of various beverages, that beer is about 3% alcohol by volume, and hard liquor is described in terms of proof, which actually represents twice the percentage of alcohol in the beverage. Example, 80 proof vodka is 40% alcohol by volume. You also likely know that different types of alcohol produce different effects. For instance, red wine has a tendency to make people feel sleepy and trigger migraine headaches, while white wine does not. By contrast, what do you know about pot? If you're like the vast majority of Americans, when you think about pot, your thoughts pretty much start and stop with the word marijuana itself. In other words, you probably perceive marijuana as a generic term like aspirin, but that is certainly not the case. Today there are nearly as many varieties of marijuana as there are alcohol, each with different names, potencies, purposes, and effects. In the pages that follow, we aim to close the gap between your knowledge about alcohol and your knowledge about pot. Our aim is to provide you with a basic understanding of the marijuana plant, including its active components and its effects on those who use it. By doing so, we hope to address many readers' stereotypes and preconceptions regarding the cannabis plant so that they can better make an assessment of whether adults should have legal access to it.